Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Parissis. I work in London, UK in partnership with Feller and Bloxham Medical in Great Neck, New York. What I want to talk about today is what the best hair type is if you're losing your hair. Now, there are a number of hair types that humans can have, and to some people's surprise, some hair types are better at hiding hair loss than others. The appearance of someone's hair can vary in a number of ways, and this can delay some patients actually noticing their own hair loss if their hair type is really good at hiding it. A patient will only notice hair loss until they've lost above 50% of their total hair. This is a staggering figure and reminds us, unfortunately, that you could be losing your hair without you even noticing. What we like to do when we assess a patient for hair loss is assess a number of features of the patient's hair. The first one is hair thickness. The word thickness has been thrown around quite a lot, and it can be confusing. Often when people say, someone's got thick hair or that person's got thick hair, generally what they mean is they've got a lot of hair. There's a difference between having a lot of hair or a lot of follicles. When I say hair thickness, I'm referring to the diameter of each hair within each follicle on the scalp. You can have small diameter hairs and you can have large diameter hairs. Different ethnicities have different thickness of hairs. I'm sure we're all aware that Spanish or South American patients often have very thick caliber or thick diameter hair. In contrast to, say, for example, some Caucasian patients who might have more fine or low caliber or low diameter hair. The reason why the diameter of someone's hair is so important when hiding hair loss is likely self-explanatory. If you have greater diameter hair, then it's likely that each particular hair is going to cover a greater surface area of the scalp. If you've got lots of hairs with greater diameter, then you're going to be able to cover, again, a greater surface area of the scalp. With fine hair, there's going to be greater gaps in between the hairs, so it might be more difficult for those patients to cover as much of the scalp as they'd like. And so patients with greater diameter hair might be able to hide their hair loss for longer, but it also means that they might notice their hair loss at a later stage when they've actually lost more follicles. What about the degree of curl of a patient's hair? There is actually a scale of curliness of hair ranging from straight hair all the way up to very coily, kinky, curly hair. And we do like to know just how curly or coily a patient's hair is before we consider treatment for hair loss. This is because in general, curly or coily hair is better at hiding hair loss. Hairs clump together and that spiral effect allows more coverage of surface area. The next factor which affects how well someone can hide their hair loss is the hair to scalp color contrast. So as you can see here, I'd like to highlight another scale, which is the Fitzpatrick scale. We learn about this in medical school with respect to skin types and skin cancer. The reason why it's relevant here is because we use this scale to compare it to the color of someone's hair. Here you can see another scale which shows hair color ranging from very dark to blonde. And what we do is we compare the color of someone's skin on the Fitzpatrick scale to the color of their hair, and we try to see whether there's a big difference between the two. If there is, then this means that it's going to be slightly harder for patients to hide their hair loss. If you imagine someone with very fair white skin with jet black hair, this will give a very high contrast between the two, and it'll highlight the gaps in between the hairs that are no longer there, essentially making sparseness or thinness a little bit more obvious. And now the question I do want to ask as someone who's fascinated by hair transplant surgery is how these factors might be relevant in a hair transplant surgery case. So before any hair transplant, we like to assess those three factors. We take those into account when we decide how many follicles or grafts we decide to transplant. If patients have very thick caliber hair that is curly and a low scalp to color contrast, we might decide to transplant fewer grafts to save more grafts in the tank for the future. And so in summary, for those three variables, having thick caliber hair that is curly and having a low contrast between your hair and your skin color is likely to buy you the most amount of time and provide coverage for the most amount of time if you're losing your hair. However, if you're watching this video and you're worried because you might not have what are quote-unquote favorable hair characteristics for both hiding hair loss and hair transplant surgery, Don't worry, because a skilled hair transplant surgeon is able to work around these factors and still provide excellent results. And here we can see a perfect example of that. This is a patient in his 20s. He came to us because he'd kind of lost his hairline, and naturally it had been bothering him, so he wanted to do something about it. This patient had low diameter hair, which we were able to measure. He had a relatively high contrast between his skin color and his scalp color. He also didn't have particularly curly hair. It is somewhat straight, so we decided to combat all of these factors by making sure that he received plenty of grafts during his hair transplant surgery. We transplanted around about 3,500 grafts, and often with patients with finer hair, they tend to have great safe donor areas. These patients have lots of healthy follicles in their safe donor area, partly because they have finer hair, meaning that the body naturally packs more of them in. And here we can see the result after his 3,500 grafts. You can see that that before and after really is life-changing for this patient. And so with that case, I just wanted to assure anyone with fine or straight hair that hair transplant surgery really still can be an option for you. And provided that you have a skilled hair transplant surgeon with an excellent team of technicians, a result like this can be very possible. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this helps you figure out what kind of hair features you might have. Once again, I'm Dr. Parissis. If you'd like a consultation with myself, submit an inquiry down in the description below, fellermedical.com, and mention Dr. Parissis. Otherwise, you can contact me on my email at drparissis@gmail.com.